My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. It's a bit early on the east coast of the United States, so I hope somebody's here to listen to this live stream. And if anybody turns up, if you could just let me know if you can hear me. So as you can see from the title of this particular live stream, it's called The Killing of the Tamimis and the Ongoing Colonization of Palestine. The reason I'm going to talk about the Tamimis, which is a family and their relatives, they live in Nabi Saleh, which is in the occupied West Bank, and a Palestinian family who are activists, and they do a weekly protest against the occupation of their land and also the illegal Israeli settlements that continue on. The UN has deemed them illegal, but unfortunately, Israeli settlers just keep bulldozing Palestinian homes and building ones on top of them. Can you hear me okay there, Lance? Just let me know if you can hear. Hi, Lance. It's always a bit tricky when I don't have anybody to let me know if the sound is coming through okay. So if you can let me know. So anyway, I'm just talking about the Tamimis, and I'll show you a recent picture of Ez Tamimi, who was killed a few days ago in the and here's a picture of him. And he was 21 years old, and the Tamimis actually are gradually being killed by the Israeli occupational forces in Nabi Saleh because of their activism. And according to an activist, Jonathan Pollock, who works with the Free the Tamimis campaign, he told a news outlet that Ez Tamimi was shot with live fire at least twice when he was by an Israeli soldier 45 meters away. And eyewitnesses said that reported that the bullets hit him in the back of the neck and in the chest. And basically the Palestinian Information Ministry said in a statement that, quote, "The execution of Tamimi in cold blood with 3 bullets at close range proves how much our people are in need of international protection against the Israeli war machine." So that's sort of just a little insight into that particular killing of Ez Tamimi. Anyway, I was the reason I wanted to talk about this is not so much to give a talk about the colonization of Palestine or any of that. I'm going to leave some links so that people can see, can find out for themselves. They're Empire File links. You can find many programs by the Empire Files. I like that program, Empire Files, because Abby Martin's an excellent journalist, and you won't get any propaganda there. So I'll leave some links to that. But the reason I'm speaking about Ez Tamimi and this issue is because, as I said, the Tamimi family and their relatives are gradually being killed by the Israeli occupation forces. And one of the reasons that the apartheid state of Israel continues to exist and continues to do this violent oppression of Palestinians is because the U.S. gives the Israeli government $11 million every day, and they would not be able to continue probably with this extreme, brutal occupation if they didn't receive $11 million a day and the full support of the U.S. government, including a lot of, politicians. Most of Congress members pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. They're given a lot of money by AIPAC, lobbying money. And so you won't find really much sort of pushback about what's going on. In fact, the US tries to do what it can to prevent the UN from criticizing Israel or doing anything like that. So, in the recent March of Great March of the Great March of Return that happened just in the last 7 weeks, as you might have been aware, there were 120 plus Palestinians, unarmed Palestinians, who were killed. They were assassinated by the Israeli occupational forces, snipers. Snipers were shooting unarmed Palestinians who were marching against being blockaded in Gaza, where it's like an open air prison. Of course, they're going to want to protest. And they were unarmed, and they were killed by 120 were killed by Israeli occupational force snipers, and thousands, literally, 10,000 or more were wounded by live fire. So, this is the situation. That's in Gaza, and that's an open air prison where it's just appalling for them. And you'll find out more about that in those programs that I'm going to post, links to. Anyway, back to Ez Tamimi, who was murdered recently. In fact, they apparently had threatened that they were going to kill him, and they threatened his family that they were going to kill Ez Tamimi, and then they came back and they did the job. So, and sort of Ahed Tamimi is another one who she was just turned 17 when they threw her in prison for 9 months. She's there with her mother. Her mother was thrown in prison as well. And her crime, in quotes, was slapping an Israeli soldier who had shot her cousin in the head, a young boy, I don't know, I think he was 12, had shot him in the head. He survived just. He's got a big caved-in part of his head that needs attention. But she was very upset about that, as you would be. And she got very upset with the Israeli soldier that shot her cousin in the head and slapped him. So now she's in prison. She only just turned 17, and she's in prison for slapping a soldier. And she's in prison for 9 months with her mother. That's Ez Tamimi again. I'm going to show you a picture. Hold on, I'll just flick through to this picture of Ahed Tamimi, just in case you're not, you don't know her. So sorry, I think I can hear something. So anyway, that's Ahed Tamimi, and she's an incredible activist, and she's been an incredible activist all her life. Her short life, and she's not that old, and now she's in prison. So they're basically just, of course the whole idea is to terrorize Palestinians and try and get them to submit, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing to all the Tamimis in particular, because they have these weekly protests in Nabi Saleh, in the occupied West Bank, and and that's just, and this family just is going through sort of hell, but they keep resisting because, the existence is resistance. And this is why, when we're aware that the US government is giving $11 million to support an apartheid state of Israel, that's a serious, this is a dreadful thing for them. It's an ongoing genocide in this apartheid state, an ongoing genocide. There's no two ways about it. It's not about Hamas, like the mainstream media, which is corporate owned, which backs up US empire and whatever it does. It's not about Hamas. It's not about anything like that. It is an ongoing genocide. The Israeli government likes to use Hamas as an excuse for why they shoot protesters and kill them by snipers and stuff. They like to, but there were no signs of Hamas anywhere in that march, the Great March of Return. There was tens of thousands of protesters, and they were all unarmed, and they were just protesting the right to be able to move freely and to end the blockade. That was the first thing, and also to return to their land, because it's not a fence that they were being it's not a border that they were protesting at. It's actually a fence of a great open air prison where Palestinians are being held, and food is being restricted to them, electricity is being restricted to them. 2 million children are drinking poisoned water. Children freeze to death. Babies freeze to death because they can't get enough heating. Old people die of heat exhaustion because it's just so oppressively hot sometimes. Children are shot they're literally bombed in this open air prison in 2014. 550 Palestinian children were killed, and I think it was 2,000 adults were killed in the bombings that went on for weeks in 2014. You might remember it. This is people that are kept in an open air prison, and it's been described by, just not just people on the left, but people on, just generally speaking, have described it as an open air prison. And people have been bombed in that open air prison. And they use this excuse that Hamas is using them as shields. No, they're just people, just like you and I, who are trying to live their life, and they're in an open air prison, deprived of food. The Israeli occupation forces will, sort of attack boats out that are coming into there's a flotilla that was recently trying to get to them. To provide supplies and to provide medical help. They try to keep that from happening. They basically are trying to gradually, they call it mowing the lawn, is what they literally refer to it as. Mowing the lawn means when they bomb Gaza, for example, and there's, the 550 children were killed in 2014 and the 2,000 adults, they call it mowing the lawn. So that gives you an idea of the attitude, the extreme racism, the genocidal position of the Israeli government, which is supported, by the way, by many Israeli civilians. I mean, the racism there is so extreme now. There are people, of course, who don't support it that live there, but the majority of people now are supportive. In fact, they wanted Netanyahu to continue in 2014 bombing Gaza. And, they basically are okay with what's happening. That's the majority. That's not an exaggeration. So I want to give you a little backdrop, if I may, to this just gives you an idea of the attitude, okay? So this was something that was filmed by a young man who was 17 in 2000. It was 2015, and it was in Bethlehem in the occupied Palestinian territories. And Yazan Ik Layal, he's 17, and he was at a community center in Aida, a refugee camp in Bethlehem, when the Israeli forces stormed into the camp. And he was using his iPhone to film Israeli jeeps that rolled in to the camp's main road, and they were shooting off tear gas. And when a soldier began issuing a message to the residents from a jeep's loudspeaker, and this is what he said. And this gives you, if this doesn't encapsulate the sort of the position of the Israeli government and of quite a majority of Israeli citizens, okay? And please note, by the way, if anybody starts accusing anybody who talks about Palestinian rights as anti-Semitic, you really need to just go away, because that's absolutely nonsense. This is about human rights. This is about a genocide of a people. And so and criticizing the Israeli government and about this genocide is quite appropriate. Okay, so and you'll get people that will say that, and of course, often it's about the Hasbara, which is actually sort of an organized Israeli government attempt to control the narrative. So, okay, so if I see any Hasbara comments in the the comment section, they won't be there for long. All right, so this is what this young man who was 17 filmed of this Israeli occupation forces jeep coming in and talking through the loudspeakers. This is what the Israeli soldier said. Quote, "People of Aida refugee camp, we are the occupation army. If you throw stones, we will hit you with gas until you die. The youth, the children, the old people, you will all die. You will all die. We won't leave any of you alive." End quote. And he goes on to say that they arrested one of the boys and he will be slaughtered. And he went on to say, "He will be slaughtered while you watch if you keep throwing stones. Go home or we will gas you till you die. Your families, your children, everyone. We will kill you." Okay, so that is that's right, Dave. Palestinians are Semitic people as well. That's correct. So anyway, that's what an Israeli soldier said through the loudspeaker to these Palestinians in the refugee camp. So that gives you a little backdrop into the extreme sort of this open genocidal talk, which actually you'll find even in protests, which I'll post a program by the Empire Files, which shows these kinds of protests and the sort of genocidal talk, the open call for the killing of Palestinians. So anyway, so that's a sort of an indication and a good backdrop into to what Palestinians are facing, and that's why this change at this point won't come from within. Change won't come from within at all because to be frank, they're too far gone. The genocidal, racist kind of attitude is so far gone, it's not going to happen from within. And that's why, particularly in the West, we need to talk about this as much as possible. We need to talk about this as much as possible because the mainstream media is just feeding people a whole lot of propaganda about this terrible issue. And like I want to just talk a little bit about now the killing of Ez Tamimi. Oh, and by the way, one of the ways we can help is to apply economic pressure to the apartheid state of Israel, just like which was done in South Africa, the apartheid state of Africa. The reason that South Africa came to a close, the apartheid in South Africa, was a boycott and divestment sanctions movement at that time. And I'm old enough to remember and to have protested that, what was happening in South Africa. But the situation for the Palestinians is far, far worse than even even South Africa at its height of apartheid. But the way to end this is when celebrities and when just the general public stop buying Israeli goods, and they celebrities stop going to perform in Israel, and that's what's happening right now with performers like Lorde, Lorde. She's sort of boycotted Israel. So has Shakira, another celebrity, has also boycotted Israel. There are some other celebrities who have as well. John Waters, I think, from Pink Floyd, he regularly talks about this issue. And that's how it's going to come to an end, with economic pressure. So that's something to think about. Not everybody agrees with that, but I know that worked for South Africa, and change is not going to come from within. So this is something that is where we are responsible for bringing an end to this appalling, brutal occupation, where Palestinians are living an absolute horrifying nightmare that never ends. And I want to talk a little bit about this video I saw just after the killing of Ez Tamimi, the 21-year-old man. So there was Israeli soldiers standing around, all gathered around his body. Just mind you, they'd shot him from 45 meters away through the neck, coming from the back of the neck and through the chest. So there was probably no chance of him surviving because I saw a huge hole in his neck, basically. Lots and lots of blood. And when the relatives turned up, and of course, fortunately, they film these things and they live stream because that's the only way they can get this out to people. Somebody, I think, was live streaming just after this happened, and basically you see a whole lot of blood. Then you see these Israeli occupying soldiers leaning around this body, and they would not let his relatives take him to the hospital. So they were preventing his relatives from taking him to the hospital, the Tamimis, and they just kept huddling around him. I mean, and these poor people, honestly, I was watching it and I was imagining myself, with, say, my brother or sort of a family member, somebody, and having these soldiers who obviously didn't want him to live, really, but that's what it looks like to me anyway. They were basically preventing him from getting any medical attention. Now, I don't think he would have survived anyway. I think it was such an extreme. They intended to kill him, shooting somebody in the back of the neck. You intend to blow out the jugular vein, and that's the end of it pretty much. But the fact that they wouldn't let the relatives take him away to hospital, and eventually after they stopped fussing around him, they put him in their own vehicle and they took him somewhere. And then he turned up to hospital really late and he was dead on arrival. Then the Tamimis tried to when they finally got the body and they were trying to do a funeral, they couldn't go through the normal routes. They were rerouted and rerouted to on their way to the funeral, and they were stopped by Israeli Defense Force jeeps who were hassling them. And Manal Tamimi, who is an older woman, she was holding up a poster of Ez Tamimi and saying, "You are killers, you are killers, you are Nazis, you are killers. Why do you kill our children?" And she kept saying that over and over again. And honestly, I'm going to post that link to that live stream, because I want people to imagine what that must be like for a family to gradually being picked off like this. I mean, there's been a few now have been killed like this, or they're in prison. They tried to kill Ahed Tamimi's father too at one point many years ago. And, they're just going to keep going basically until they kill them all. They're going to kill them all, that's for sure. Either that or have them rotting in prison. That's the intention. All because they are doing protests every week in Nabisala in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank. And they're protesting. They don't want their homes bulldozed and people just taking over their houses. They don't want to be basically in fear of their life in their house and outside and being treated like quote unquote animals, because that's how they're being treated. And so, that's they just want rights, and they want to be able to live in freedom, just live and be able to have the same rights as Israeli citizens. But this is not going to happen because there is no intention with the kind of governments they get there and the attitude of the many Israeli citizens. There are really good Israeli citizens there that are appalled at this, but there are many who are not. And I also invite you to check out Jewish Voice for Peace, because that's a very good organization in relation to this issue. the Jewish Voice for Peace. So anyway, and I want to say something. I'm not going to talk much longer, but I want to say something about Manal Tamimi. That's the woman who regularly posts live streams. And I invite you to please check out those live streams and spread them widely if you can. The only way this is going to stop is when people realize what's really happening and they get beyond the propaganda of the mainstream media. That is the only way this is going to end. There's so much propaganda about Palestinians that they've been reduced to sort of, kind of monsters, really. They've been reduced to, people think of them as inherently evil and terrorists, literally, that they're evil people. That's when you have an otherization of a group to the point where they become targets of violence. We do that with non-human animals. We do that with Palestinians. We do that with Muslims. We do that with any group that we want to dominate and kill. And that's what's being done with Palestinians to such an extreme extent that a lot of people just are disinterested in the whole thing. And this ongoing genocide, which has been going on for at least 60 years, continues on. And it's just a nightmare. I had no idea how bad this was until, I don't know, I used to not know what to think of it because I never got a real good left news source about it. All I heard was mainstream media stuff. That's all I heard. And we don't have any decent fourth estate in Australia. We don't. We have a worse situation in some ways in Australia with the mainstream media than the US. At least you have some good independent media there, like the Real News Network and journalists like Abby Martin and Ben Norton and people like that. And sometimes Democracy Now!, if they're not promoting regime change in Syria, they actually have some good information on Palestine. So, but we don't have that. And so I even our mainstream media, even the media that I thought was okay here, has started promoting full-on US propaganda. So we're completely bereft here in Australia of good sort of good independent media in some ways. I'm sure it exists somewhere, but it certainly doesn't have much of an airing. So I didn't really know what to think of it. I knew there was something wrong, this situation with Palestinians. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I just, and all I could find was mainstream propaganda. And it wasn't until I think it could have been Democracy Now!, and they do a lot of programs. And then there was the Empire Files, which is brilliant. And I thought, and it's just unmistakable that this is an ongoing genocide and that it's not a conflict and it's not a war, which people like to present it as. It is a genocide. So, so when I realized that, that's when I thought I have to do something, and I want other people to do something. I want us all to do something, not to sit on our hands and sort of go, and think that activism is putting little sad faces on articles and stuff. We have to do something, like either get out on the streets, disseminate good information, good left, independent media information, and we have to, and I would personally join the BDS campaign, and because that's such an important thing. And as I said, change isn't going to come from within. So there's a bunch of things we can do, but one of the things we can start doing is start talking about it, and support celebrities too, who are actually going to pay in a big way financially for being against going to Israel and performing. We can also support the Jewish Voice for Peace and organizations like that. And So I just want to talk a little bit more about Manal Tamimi's live streams. Go and check out her page and on Facebook, and I'll leave a link to that. And regularly, she shoots outside of her house through the bars. And yes, a couple of days ago, I was watching her live stream, and it just, as usual, showed Israeli forces in the street shooting down the road. I couldn't see what was happening down the road, but they were shooting down the road as usual. And then the next thing, and one particular live stream, they actually shot something at her window because they could see her filming. And then, but this particular one, a couple of days ago, they were shooting down the road, and then finally, after all of that, and there was some stones being thrown at them, because that's a traditional thing for Palestinians to do, is to throw stones. It's sort of unarmed resistance, you might say. It's a bit of a David and Goliath kind of thing. But anyway, it's a traditional thing to do. And of course, they can go to prison for 20 years. That's actually, they can go to prison for 20 years for throwing stones. So anyway, these young teenagers ran down the street after the Jeep that was leaving, and they were throwing stones. And the next thing, there's only 10 teenagers. And the next thing, I see this hail of tear gas canisters coming at them. And there must have been about 20, 2 for each young Palestinian teenager, 2 canisters. I mean, there was just a rain of tear gas. And it was at that point, I'd been watching a number of these live streams of Manal Tamimi and some other things, and then the awfulness of the killing of Ez Tamimi. And then, and just being aware of what they go through. And this is just one family of many. This is just normal. This is not an aberration. It's normal. And I just started crying because I just couldn't stand it. I mean, this is the thing, right? All I've done lately is catch up on some live streams that I missed of this particular woman, Palestinian woman. And just watching those live streams was enough to make me cry. And I think, imagine living that every day, living that horror and not feeling safe inside your home or outside because they can bust into your home anytime they want. There's actually a thing where Israeli soldiers can bust into homes at 3 a.m. And if the person in the bed that they're after raises their head quickly, they'll shoot them. So basically, if you get woken up in the middle of the night, if you're a Palestinian, and you suddenly raise your head, you're probably dead. They just execute you in your bed. These are real things. Real things. This is not propaganda. This is really what's happening there. It is a horror story. It's terrorizing a particular ethnic group and killing them off one by one or en masse, depending on what they feel like, when they feel like, how they feel like. It's kind of almost become like something to, like a sort of a fun thing to do. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It's sort of almost become like when people entertain themselves by going out and killing animals, that kind of thing. And I'm not exaggerating. You just have to think about what that Israeli soldier said through the loudspeaker to those people in that Palestinian refugee camp. It's just like that. And you only have to see the live streams from this woman, Manal Tamimi, to see what it's like for her every day. The terrorizing, what it's like for her every single day. And Ez Tamimi is in prison. Who knows what's happening? They had some Israeli politicians making suggestions that they hope, one was made a suggestion, they hoped that somebody raped her in prison. They didn't actually use that word, but they said they hoped that something would happen to her that was out of sight of people. And, this is the kind of thing that they get away with because they have the full support of the US government. Pretty much all politicians are quiet about about this. They just ignore it. The mainstream media is fully on board with this. So it's a complicity that is, and I have to mention Razan al-Najjar. You've probably seen her. I'll show a image of her for you. Hold on a sec. She was a 21-year-old medic who was shot in the back through the heart while she was running away. She's a medic. She was wearing white. So the Israeli snipers at the Great March of Return could see that she was a medic. But anyway, she was running away with her hands in the air. She'd just been treating somebody. And the next thing, she was killed, assassinated, basically, because they know these people. They know that, medics wear white. The woman had her hands in the air. So, this is the sort of, this woman who used to treat injured Palestinians, the unarmed Palestinian protesters. There were thousands of them at the Great March of Return in the last, that happened a few weeks ago. It ended 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was about 7 weeks long. She was treating those Palestinians, all sorts of awful wounds. There was thousands of them wounded, and 120 were killed by snipers. And she was one of them. She kept treating them from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every night until they eventually killed her. And she's not the only medic that they killed. There's not the only medic that they killed. There was another medic as well who was killed, and there was also a Canadian doctor, Dr. Tariq Labani, who was shot in both legs while he was treating Palestinian unarmed protesters. Shot in both legs, and I'll leave a link to his interview with Democracy Now! I actually hoped to interview Dr. Labani when it's in a few weeks. I don't know. Sometimes it's a little tricky getting interviews with people. They're very busy, and I'm sort of a no one, so it's a bit hard. They've got lots of demands on them. But anyway, I'll try and see if I can interview him, because he's a very kind man, and he was very traumatized by that. Traumatized really by seeing people being killed by just people being killed in front of him, and treating many, many wounded people who were really just peacefully protesting near a fence, which is basically the external part of the outdoor prison, open air prison, which is Gaza. So this is sort of, I just really just wanted to talk about this because I didn't want to talk about so much the history of the whole thing, because I'm going to, as I said, leave links, and you can look at that yourself, how Palestine became colonized. And there's one show where Abby Martin is interviewing an IDF soldier who talks about how he realized he was a terrorist. And of course, he's been vilified by many Israelis for saying that. It's sort of like people who speak out, Israelis and, people who speak out against this brutal occupation are vilified terribly and often have to leave that country. And that's happened to a number of people. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about the feelings I had about watching these live streams, and that, if I feel like this, I just cannot imagine the absolute, there is no word to describe how awful this is, and the more you watch what's going on there, and the more you understand what's going on there, you realize there just isn't a word to describe how awful this is. It's just sort of, I don't know. It's, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop, and we have to do something. Oh, thanks, Lon, for posting that. I appreciate it. Lon Defender, sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Defender, she's posted this, the Empire Files. Thanks so much for posting that, Lon. Yeah, there is no, I'm sure you would agree, anybody who's followed this issue and really looked at it beyond the mainstream media propaganda is probably as horrified as I am. And the only way it's going to end is for us to do something. The only way for this to end is for us to speak out and do something. We have to do something. We have to do something. And we have to speak out about it, and we have to share information about it, and we have to join in. The only way it's going to end is if we do that. So anyway, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. I hope that you will check out those live streams by Manal Tamimi and just try and imagine what that would be like if that was you and seeing this kind of thing going on. I mean, they even prevent mothers from taking their children to hospital. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine as a mother, being prevented from giving your child medical help? How, and what amazes me, so, somebody said to me, it's amazing that Palestinians just aren't going berserk and sort of like, I mean, the particularly this recent Great March of Return, the incredible force, the incredible violence toward them. They were unarmed, just marching for their rights. And yet they, and they managed to keep it to a sort of, as a non-violent, as a sort of a Gandhian type thing. And in some ways that is the best way, because then hopefully the whole world can see, people can make up excuses about Hamas if they like, but that's all it is. These are just excuses so that they can keep oppressing and killing off Palestinians until there'll be none left, and then there'll be no problem. That's the bottom line. So anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. I don't think there's anything else that I just want to show you a couple more photos, if I may, because just in case. I just want to show you how the mainstream media likes to talk about this issue. This gives you an idea. The RT News talked about it. This is RT News, and they actually usually do good coverage of things. They said the terrible massacre, Israeli kills 41, injures 1,700 Gaza protesters at U.S. Embassy opens in Jerusalem. The Washington Post says the U.S. Embassy officially opens in Jerusalem, handing Israel a long-sought win, but setting off clashes from outraged Palestinians. I mean, this is the kind of news that you get. It's just completely washed, and it's deception by omission, all kinds of things like that. And there's, I'll just show you another image of, I'm just trying to flick through. There's some very sad photos here, and I won't show you. But anyway, I think I've just about, I don't think I've got any other photos to show you. Okay, so that's really all I want to talk about. I'm sorry that I haven't looked through the comments section. I sometimes find I get a bit distracted, and then I start going off on a tangent, and that gets a little bit, so I've decided that I won't look at comments while I'm trying to talk about things. So anyway, I'll just leave it here, and I hope that you'll all sort of I hope that you'll all think about joining in this boycott, divestments, and sanctions, and share whatever you can from the Empire Files about this issue, because it's so important that we do something. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts on Real Progressives. You're watching Faint Signals from Viga. Till next time. Bye for now.